So the last thing we'll talk about in this module is the symbol mapping principle. And basically I want to go over this so that we can start seeing our data visualizations as symbols or as sets of symbols. So with the symbol mapping principle, and actually in the study of symbols, which is called semiotics, let's get to a little bit of vocabulary. So first there's the referent. And the referent is the thing that is to be symbolized. In this case, we're actually symbolizing the referent as this globe of the world. So that we're using. This is a symbol from when I talk about symbols. And so this is, we want with the world, we're going to symbolize that in a variety of ways. And in this case, because this is a visual analytics course, we're going to talk about our representation or our visualization symbolizing what's going on in the world. And what's required with, so now let's get into the visual analytics part of it. What's required from the world to get from that to our representation is, that's going to have to be translated into data. This is a database from that. That data is then going to have to go through some kind of computational transformation to get it ready for the representation. That could be just a little bit of transformation, or it could be quite sophisticated and powerful transformations. Then we have the marks in the media. This is when people can start to see these representations of data, and then finally that goes to a person or people. And so what we want to talk about is that there are actually two major mappings that have to happen in order for us to start interpreting the world. The first is the mapping between the world and the marks in the medium. So these changes in the world map to changes in the display. And then changes in the display will be interpreted as changes in the world. So that's the second mapping. How are these marks in the media, how is this display interpreted or mapped to an understanding or a picture of the world? So when we see these things, we're actually thinking that we're seeing the world. So those are the two mappings, from referent to symbol, and from symbol to understanding or interpretation, or, as the title of the course is, to sense making. So the million-dollar question is, when a person is looking at this display, when are they seeing the representation of the world? When they think they're actually seeing the world, or when would they describe what they're seeing as that of being the world, and when do they describe what they're seeing as just being the marks in the medium? And when we're talking about data visualizations, it goes even deeper. So when are you seeing the world, but understanding that this representation of the world has to go through multiple layers of translation and transformation, each of those making assumptions about the world along the way. So is what you're seeing what you actually think you're seeing? In the art world, Rene Magritte kind of hit this head on in his work in 1929 that's called The Treachery of Images. And so for those of you who don't speak French or haven't seen this work before, the caption below is, "This is not a pipe." And what he's saying there, at least what I think he's saying there, is that no, what you're seeing is not a pipe. It's a painting of a pipe. These are blobs of pigment organized in a specific way so that I can start to see things. So I can start to see things like where's the light coming from? I can look at this lighter pigmentation and see this is where the light's coming from. I see this different pigmentation through here, and I don't think that's a light thing. I think that's a materials thing. And I see I see this over here, and I see some changes in pigmentation here, and that seems to be not a change of material thing, but a carving or a change in direction of the material. From this I know which end, if this were a pipe, I know which end to put the tobacco in and which end to put my mouth on. And yet again, this is all just a series of blobs of paint. And I think it's very powerful to say, when you see this, especially us non-French speakers, when you see this, and I ask students this all the time, what do you see here? They say, that's a pipe. And it's absolutely not a pipe. And it gets to be even kind of more meta in that, well, when I'm showing this, I'm usually showing this on a projector, so it's not even a bunch of pigment. So it's actually a bunch of light pixels that are representing a bunch of paint pigments, which are then representing a pipe. So just another representation of all these different transformations, and I actually I'm not covering all of them here, but these are just the kind of the psychological transformations that are going, not the physical transformations of the data. When I go from reality, again, this is my referent, I need to go through a designer's point of view of what they thought is important, then I go through the representation. So this is the Marx in the medium lens, and then I go through the observer's expectations, what they think they're going to see in the first place, or what are their interests in seeing something in general or something specifically that affects how this is perceived. Then I go through a lens of their goals about what I would see next or how much I'm going to look at it. Then I get to the sensory organs, and oh, by the way, the goals and expectations and other things happen over here as well. So I'm going through multiple lenses to try to derive meaning from this, all of those being translations, all of them being transformations, and none of them working at kind of full fidelity or full validity or full precision. And that's why we say, again, back to the mantra, that data is not information. They are not the same thing. The data become informative. They are transformed or translated into information based on what's going on in the larger frames of reference. Now we're talking about the Marx in the medium. We're talking about the designer, the output of the designer, and also the interests and expectations of the observer. Both are incredibly important. So with that mantra firmly in mind, I want you to read this definition of information. This comes straight from Google. I didn't even go to Merriam-Webster's website. It's just put in definition of information, and this came up in the little Google contextual bubble that comes up. And I want you to read these, and I want you to tell me why this definition particularly vexes me. So it starts innocuously enough. It says, facts provided or learned about something or someone. Facts, that's, okay, I can get that. That's, information. We're learning something. It has relevance in the real world. It has some kind of connection to it. A vital piece of information. Even, okay, fine. I can use it in a sentence. Great. And then we get to synonyms. And again, we start, okay, details, particulars, facts, figures. Okay, I mean, maybe they're losing a little bit of context there. And then we get to statistics and data, and that's where I think this really comes off the rails. And I think that's why it's very unclear, or it's very mushy in the kind of the greater or larger definitions of these, how information is really different than data. Or at least we need, in every language, we need to have some kind of discriminatory word or words. We need the language to show the difference between these two different concepts. What's interesting, though, is you get to the second one, and it's perfect. What is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement or sequence of things? Exactly. It's not the data itself. It's what is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement or sequence of, and you could just say of data. Just take out things and put data. Now we're good. Now, unfortunately, they put that as the second one. It should be the first one, and the other one should be deleted or just take out these things. But that I want it again to be very clear how that's different. So I want to try to explain this with a more concrete example to try to bring this concept home of why it's really important to have the interest in the expectations of the observer in mind, and that's really that last mapping, how it's really important. So what you see here are two symbols and some words below each of those two symbols. By the way, words are also symbols. So really what you see is depending on how you're chunking this, you could be seeing 4 different symbols, or 2 symbols up above and a series of symbols below. All of those are different potential interpretations of this. And so I want you to take a second again, if you want to pause, that's fantastic. And I want you to write down what you think you're seeing here. Okay, so maybe on your list is these are hearts. Maybe you see colors. Maybe you said that there is metadata below. Maybe this is maybe you know that this is computer code there. Maybe you see a gradient here. These are outlines. All of these things are possible things that are beyond your list. And so what I want to start thinking about is what will be the context of these things? How are these things used? So, said in another way, if you had data type descriptions on your list, what would be the information that these things are conveying? What's kind of the information things? What are on the list for them? So let me nudge you along a little bit. I'm sure those two hearts are used in variety of different ways, but let's put you in more of a context. These hearts were used in this message between two people, and and it basically says, "And I will, blue heart, yellow heart, you boys forever, comma, always, comma, no matter what." And the M is also stylized, so that's something different as well. So so that gives you a little bit of context. Does that change what you think about with the information that's being encoded in there, the meaning that's being encoded in there, and more importantly, the information that's drawn out of this message? So here's where context importance really kind of slaps you in the face. So if I were to tell you that message that I just gave you was actually in response to another message that said, "We heart you, red heart, Aunt Sarah, but we can't talk for the next 3 hours, hashtag game faces on, hashtag the game," and it was sent with the picture that you see on your left, then maybe that gives you a little bit more context. And usually when I give this when I show this slide, I get chuckles and laughs and nodding heads. And this is where context is going to be really important, because I don't know where you're seeing this, where you as the observer are watching this. I don't know where you're from. When I'm doing this at Ohio State, it's pretty clear where they're from, or at least where they've been the last couple months. And so there's a shared understanding of what this picture means. I'm not entirely sure if that understanding gets through depending on where you're from. But in Columbus, Ohio, the game means one thing. It happens on one day. It happens on the Saturday, usually at noon, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and it's a football game, American football. So all of that context, none of that was put in this message. It was all just understood. And this is actually coming from my two boys. This is their message up here, and this is back from their Aunt Sarah, who happens to live in Michigan and is a graduate of the University of Michigan. Much different meaning from those symbols baked in that context, baked in this overall setting. So as we move forward, I want all the things that we do in the design, everything we think about analysis, how are we going to immerse those things in context? How are we going to understand or try to predict the context in which they're going to be received? And how are we going to do all of our work with those finesses, with those rules, with those thoughts about symbol mapping in mind, so that we stand half a chance to eradicate data overload and work on systems and design for systems that are resilient and not overly brittle.